Hello and welcome to the Pipeline Industries Guild's PDN webinar. Today, the Professional Development Network are lucky enough to be joined by Joshua Burrows. Hi, Josh.
Hi, Ash. You all right?
Josh, yeah, good. Thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm not bad. Thank you. Not bad.
Good stuff. Josh is one of our Regional Presentation Finalists who competed in the Sir John Parker competition back in March 2020 and has kindly agreed to join us today. So without further ado, Josh, it's over to you, mate.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so my name's Josh Burrows. So back on the day, I gave a presentation on managing pipeline operators' assets when low cover becomes an issue in agricultural land. This was a topic that I've been involved with whilst working at Fisher German. It's a topic that tends to come into sort of day-to-day practice, and it's something that today, hopefully, I can keep you interested enough for 15 minutes and hopefully let you learn a little bit about it. So without further ado, just a little bit on what's going to happen today. So I'll give you a bit of background about myself. I'll talk a little bit about low cover, what it is, how it happens, and why it's such a big deal in our industry, the interested parties that are surrounding it, how we as land agents work to mitigate it, and a little bit on how we can educate those that will be involved in it, and hopefully how moving forward there may be solutions that we can present to it. So without further ado, a little bit of background on myself. I joined Harper Adams University in 2017 to study rural enterprise and land management. I'm currently in my third year of study out of 4 on a placement with Fisher German. This year also counts towards my assessment of professional competency to become a qualified chartered surveyor. Since joining Fisher German in 2019 on placement from university, my role has been focused on working for clients in the oil and gas industry, which own and operate pipelines across the UK's rural landscape. So what do we do? As land agents, we are professionals that are trained in managing land and property. This gives us a quite unique set of skills, able to act as the link between our utility clients and their landowners and the occupiers of that land within the sort of pipelines infrastructure that runs through the land as well. These owners and occupiers can vary from residential homeowners with utilities in their gardens to large landowners who own estates with thousands of metres of pipeline that go through their properties. Pipelines owned by the utility companies are commonplace on rural property, really. Much of the infrastructure is ageing currently, and it's at a capacity already, meaning that pipe bursts, repair works, equipment upgrades, these are all quite frequent things that we get involved in. Within our services, we specialise in assisting our clients to exercise their statutory rights, the wayleaves, the easements that they've agreed or have been granted to access these pipelines and carry out the works that are necessary to them. So low cover, what is it, how does it happen, and why does it happen? So low cover is where the amount of earth over a pipeline has been reduced over time. This is caused by a number of factors leading to pipelines being put in dangerous positions and potentially affecting third parties. So although there's no legal minimum depth a pipeline must actually sit, the industry assesses low cover using a 3-tier approach really with this. So over 900 millimetres deep would be classed as sort of low risk. Between sort of 750 millimetres and 900 millimetres, we class that as medium risk. And then anything below 750 millimetres is classed as high risk. Typically, this low cover with the pipeline occurs due to land changing and soil moving, which can be from farming operations, so turning the soil, cultivating it, ploughing it, or the development of the land. Also, something as simple as a strong wind can affect it because it carries soil away from the fields into runoffs and watercourses that will surround the field. The pipeline itself may also rise in certain soils if it's not anchored effectively. Anchoring isn't common practice anymore, but it's something that has been used in the past. This becomes an issue really because the pipeline leaves itself open to higher risk. So if low cover does arise, then it's at high risk of being struck, and thus it causes a hazard to third parties. So this is an example here of low cover. As you can see, the image on the left-hand side shows a pipeline at a low cover depth, which if a farmer was to plough that would quite easily hit it. And the image on the right, once again, we'd still class that as low cover because you could hit that with a subsoiler, but it's an example where we might be able to dig down and drop it down. So this is what happens when it goes wrong. So this happened in Dixon, Illinois, back in 2017. A pipeline ruptured, killing a father and son and giving third-degree burns to 65% of the victim's body. The accident was as a result of farm workers installing drainage measures, and the individuals were using a tractor to install the drain pipe. It essentially got stuck in the mud. They went to pull it out with another tractor, and unfortunately in doing so they hit the pipeline, and that's where the father and son got killed and the third victim was injured. Yeah, so not nice. So who are the interested parties that surround it? So first off, we've actually got the landowners and the tenants. So the main parties who feel the effect of low cover are those who live with the land day in, day out. These are our custodians, essentially, of the land. They farm crops over it, they farm livestock on it, and the land are all technicalities which play the factor in low cover. So, for example, with livestock, you can't keep pigs over a pipeline due to the natural habit of boring. So pigs love to dig soil up and they love to go searching for all sorts within the soil. It has been known for pigs to damage and disturb pipelines. I don't think any pig has managed to rupture one yet. But also, these pipelines are acquired for low cover. It's mainly to sort of stop machinery and heavy machinery going over the top of them and carrying out any surface works or undersurface works. So the next one would also be the public. So large-scale works can have impacts on surrounding communities, such as lane closures for works, increased levels of traffic for works, and on any low cover sites, any disturbance of them. So say a pipeline was to rupture, the public would also be affected directly. They'd have gas cut off or oil cut off. They may not have heating. They may even be affected by an explosion. We also have the pipeline owners. The reason the pipeline is actually in place. So these owners may have purchased a pipe which they've chosen to operate, or they've installed a pipe for the purpose of operating. It's the pipeline owner's responsibility to make sure the pipeline is safe at all times. It is their responsibility to make sure that this is monitored. Then, of course, you've got governments and councils. So the government are responsible for changing legislation that surrounds the pipelines. They have to communicate effectively with pipeline owners and operators to make sure that this is all in line with what the industry sees as realistic. Pipelines are regulated under numerous forms of legislation based on the commodity that they transport. So it's also the point as to which they are put in the ground can also affect the legislation for the wayleys and easements that we help them use to access them. So the next step is mitigation. So how do we as land agents mitigate this? So the best way to explain low cover really is to give you an example of how different types require different forms of mitigation, and how we manage the low cover to make sure our clients are informed appropriately within these scenarios, which are quite common. So we've got three forms of low cover where pipelines, so the first one here would be a pipeline going across 3 fields and also over a road there. As you can see, public highway. We've got an arable field that's cropped with wheat, and we've got a award-winning vegetable cropping field, which has been Farmers Weekly winner of vegetable cropping for the last decade. It's the farmer's prized possession. It's where he makes all his money and can buy all his Range Rovers and drive around and terrorise the local community. So yeah, if we go with these three examples, hopefully we can give you some good demonstrations. So low cover ditch works is the first one that I want to start on. So low cover ditch works are probably one of the most common, one of the most common causes of low cover. It's where a ditch has got a pipeline that runs across the ditch, there's naturally going to be an area of low cover in there because the soil isn't going to be above the pipeline as much because it is a ditch. So if we take the public highway as an example of mitigation, we'd typically have to consider the approach to this and how we would remediate it. So step one, go out and assess the low cover, talk with the landowner, take the details in order to get back to the client, to advise them on remediation. So take some pictures, maybe look at, is the pipeline visible? What's the purpose of the ditch? Is it used for drainage? So on and so forth. And then a level of public engagement will also be required with this, because as you can see, where the pipeline is crossing that ditch, it's right next to a public highway. So due to the nature of working closely to a road, we're going to have to shut off a lane of traffic, which means that we must engage with the local public in order to make them aware of any disruptions. And finally, we're going to have to liaise with the landowner for the most suitable date to carry out the works for what we'd see as a simple remediation, a concrete canvas. So we'd get a good date, we'd come in, we'd organise the best way to go about it. Beforehand, we'd do a pre-record of condition of the works. We'd make sure that there's no crop in the ground that we're going to damage. If so, we'd discuss that with the farmer before doing any works. And then afterwards, we'd look at doing a post-record of condition for these works and assess the level of damage that might have been caused within it. Any compensation that's due to the farmer would probably be included within the deed. So when you do go to do these works, it is natural that the deed mentions that remediations can come with compensation and it is owed to the farmer afterwards. So this is a perfect example of a concrete canvas ditch as well. As you can see, what we've done is peeled back the topsoil either side. We've put the concrete canvas in and remediated it to how it should have been before. And as you can see already, water is running through that ditch and it's operating as it should do. That's another one there, slightly dry ditch, slightly lower sitting, but nevertheless, same example, same theory behind it. And it also, we try not to disturb any land drains, and we will, we'll account for that factor if it does come across them. So then we go into the wheat field. So the wheat field really is another form of low cover that we're going to look at, because we can't just simply go sticking a concrete canvas in the middle of a wheat field. If we do that, you're going to have maybe 1 year where the farmer's farming it and he knows about that concrete canvas, but the next year he might rent it out to his neighbouring farmer who goes along and thinks, oh, this looks like a good field, but could do with a bit of a plough. So he goes in, drops his plough on the ground, straight away hits the concrete canvas, churns it up, and then ultimately hits the pipeline, and we get a bad result from that. So no, what we do here is we'd consider looking at putting a licence in place. So a licence is a fantastic contract which is fast and easy to agree with landowners. It allows the pipeline operator to occupy the land within the agreement so that no husbandry may take place over it. However, although a licence allows some thinking time for pipeline operators to decide on how they want to remediate it in the long term, it's not a permanent solution. It has to be renewed annually, and it also comes with the cost of crop loss as well as other factors that the landowner may be incurring. In an example like the one that we've presented here, we'd consider the low cover and the best possible solution, which would probably be a deed of variation, which is another method adopted by companies which involves substantial negotiations based on carefully calculated valuations, factoring numerous elements such as permanent loss of crop in perpetuity or until the expiry of the deed of the pipeline, which typically is within sort of 40 to 50 years' time. This is for the company to essentially purchase the land and have the right in place where no husbandry may be practiced upon the land. This can prove quite effective, providing that it's fenced correctly. However, you may struggle to get a landowner to agree to a deed of variation as they don't like losing their land, or they feel like the value offered is not representative of the permanent loss of crop. There's always going to be a factor that comes in that they don't like. Ultimately, issues such as these are negotiated by the land agent. So ourselves, this is where we step in to help resolve these and get the deed agreed and make sure that our clients can carry out the works that they need and that pipeline is safe. So as I've shown here, this is a great example. The picture on the right shows a fenced off area where a licence might be occurring, or it could be that the deed of variation has been placed there in perpetuity to stop the landowner carrying out any husbandry over it. If he does need to cross that area, if there's no way to cross it, then we put a bridge in place, as is shown on the bottom left. But ultimately, most pipeline operators will not allow any excavations within 3 metres either side of the pipeline. So then we move on to the award-winning vegetable field. So this is going to be the farmer's prize field. This is what he's, every year he comes to this field, he absolutely loves putting his crop in the ground. It's what he lives for. But with this, you wouldn't approach it in the form of the previous, as the previous example, because the pipeline is crossing over the field. So although a deed of variation is the preferred method by utility operators to resolve low cover issues, it's not necessarily the option that will get agreed. When a pipeline crosses the middle of a field, negotiating this with a landowner to agree a deed of variation would be extremely difficult, essentially because the field's been split in two, working operations become increasingly more challenging, and the pipeline operators may turn to the last resort, which would be a soil importation really for this. So a soil import allows pipeline operators to import soil onto the field to raise the profile over the pipeline. So as well as the profile of the field, there is not, it's basically where they'll raise the entire profile of the field so that there's not an undulating topography that wasn't previously there. This method can face a lot of complications, however, as a land agent will have to consider numerous factors for this to take place, such as soil structure of the previous soil, the nutrients that are held in it, the land usage previously, the cropping varieties that are going into it, the ongoing losses after the importation for how many years, sourcing uncontaminated soils, making sure it's got no weeds, such as Japanese knotweed or anything along those sorts of lines. These are all factors that we consider when we're importing soil, because this is what the farmer's going to be thinking of. This is what he wants. He wants a field that is ultimately just going to go back to normal. So engineers will assess the suitability of the site. They'll look at, can the physics actually happen with it? So whether the pipelines, low cover areas, they'll be looking at, there's a sloping hill there. Will that drag the soil off the top of the pipeline? There's a water course at the bottom. As I mentioned beforehand, soil does like to drag itself down to a water course. But these are typically the last resort. They're high in cost. They're not necessarily always a solution due to soil erosion. And this is why it's key to consider other factors when we mitigate low cover. So this is a perfect example here of a soil importation. As you can see, where the lower level is, on the right hand picture is where the field will have started, then they've raised it and raised it and raised it, and that profile's been flattened out by a bulldozer, and then it'll have been worked so that the soil can get back to how it was previously used for cropping. It doesn't always work out that this is a permanent solution. It may be that they have to come back and look at another solution for it. As I said, it's not always effective. However, if it does come to this, then this will be the solution for it. So how can we educate people moving forward? So at current positions, we have uses such as LSBud and LineWatch. These are free online searches which any individual user can use to check the works against over 75 asset owners which have signed up to the LSBud and the LineWatch services. The service is designed to be used by anyone that needs to know where utility assets are in order to work safely. So say you wanted to go out and do some ditch work in a field, you'd do a search of that area, it'd come back and you'd be able to say yes or no, I know whether I'm going to hit someone's utility asset in that ground. And then ultimately, there's the most common practice which is currently used, which is monitoring pipelines. Pipelines are regularly walked over, typically between sort of 2 to 5 years. This is for the purpose of depth testing. So that's how we seek the low cover at the moment. Some may choose to walk over by foot, others choose to carry out searches by helicopter, or even have engineers checking the pipeline, such as services carried out by ourselves. We have our own pipeline engineers at Fisher German that go out on behalf of our clients and maintain pipelines for them. And this is constantly maintaining and monitoring pipelines for clients. And it helps us maintain strong relationships with landowners, really. You know, if we've got an engineer on the ground and Joe Bloggs comes along and says, oh, well, I can't go and do this on the field because of X, Y, and Z, our pipeline engineer then comes back to land agent and tells us what the issue is, and we can have that resolved really without it being an issue to the client. So once again, showing the value of a land agent within the practice. And then moving forward, how can we educate people about it really? What can we do to stop this from happening? Now, I myself am a big believer in the pipeline monitoring technology that we've already developed. So although I've not developed my skills in either technology or engineering, I do feel like technology in pipeline monitoring will be the future, and hopefully we can eventually send pigs down pipelines which are able to use a form of sonar or scanning which can detect low cover for us to help collect data, which over time we'll be able to predict where low cover is going to occur. However, we need to realise that low cover is quite an ongoing issue for the industry as it sits. It's not going away anytime soon, and without innovations in this sector really, we're going to have to carry on being reactive to this issue rather than proactive. And yeah, so I hope you've learned a little bit from that. My name's Josh Burrows, and if you've got any further questions, please feel free to ask.
Thanks, Josh. That was thanks for that. That was absolutely brilliant. Really fantastic and fascinating to understand a little bit more about the different mitigation issues and challenges for the low cover you've got, and which one is preferred in which scenario. Really interesting to understand a little bit more about that decision that gets made. So no, thanks again for sharing, Josh. I did have a quick question for you. Not quite as intrusive as the ones that were asked on the night of your presentation competition, but I just wanted you to cherry pick a few bits that you enjoyed most about participating in the actual competition back in March in 2020, and would you recommend it to others to take part in the future?
Best bits about participating. Well, you get free pizza if you participate. So that's always a bonus. But no, in all seriousness, it was, to be fair, it gave me an actual reflection of the work that I do. I don't think people stop and take enough time to realise the work that they do and how kind of important it is. I know that for ourselves as land agents, I think that we're so caught up in doing jobs that we don't really realise that. And it was quite nice to look back and see how much I'd learned over the last year with Fisher German about what I've been doing, how much I'd actually been involved, and how if you'd asked me to give this presentation sort of 12 months ago, I would have no idea what I'm talking about. I wouldn't have been able to piece 2 and 2 together with it. And realistically, I think if I was sat on the other end, it'd be quite hard to understand it at times. But no, it's been quite good showing how much I've learned and grown and being able to pass some of that knowledge on to other people. And I definitely recommend it to others that are out there. I know that other people on the night that gave presentations they were fantastic. I'd learned a lot from them really. It was very interesting seeing into different insights of the industry and how different people do different bits and bobs. But yeah, it really does. I think it helps a lot of people as well as a professional, for the sake of presenting and getting out there and getting involved in these things. It's good to get your name into the industry, and if people do have further queries, it can help further down the line with having someone to go to.
I absolutely agree, and it's also great to hear that. So no, thank you very much, Josh. So on behalf of the Pipeline Industries Guild, thank you for joining us, and for everyone listening, we hope you enjoyed this PDN webinar. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you very much.